Welcome to Across the Bifrost, the Mighty Thor podcast, where on each and every episode we explore the world of Marvel's Mighty Thor. On this episode, we are going to be doing a review of the most recent issue of the Knull Limited Series, number 3. And this was a fantastic issue. At the end of last issue, we were teased a Thanos and Knull fight, and boy, howdy, did we get it. And we're also going to be filling out some lore for where this Queen in Black big meta lead up is going to be going. Did a little bit of research. I depended heavily on him for that research, and I think it's going to be good. Eric and I have both enjoyed the first 2 issues of this. So Eric, going into the 3rd issue of the series, how have you felt about the series overall so far, if people haven't checked out the other 2 reviews you and I have done?
Yeah, heavy metal. I mean,
This is
I've
Reign
been
of Blood
loving
Part 2.
that's right, Rain of Blood Part 2. I've been super enjoying it because I like the violence and the smash 'em up. And I'm not a big gore guy. I don't like the
No?
body horror type stuff, but this is a different kind of gore. This is like revenge violence, null, twisted, dark stuff. And I've been
Yeah.
super fascinated by his new power to sort of like teleport into anywhere where there's nothingness. And
Yeah.
I'm really intrigued by Hela having this glow up for like the first time in decades, that she's really
Right.
becoming a universal level threat. So I'm excited to see where it goes. I think that this issue definitely promised a brawl, and we got it. And so there's a lot to enjoy about this issue and the series so far.
Couldn't agree more. I think the big reason why a Thor podcast slash Thor YouTube channel now, which is still weird to get used to reframing and resaying things. We're here really for the hella of it all, but also like I'm a big fan of the King in Black crossover event from a few years ago, and we know there is a Queen in Black event coming up, and we're going to be putting up another episode, short conversation about speculating more about that, because we got some more variant covers and some more details through Marvel Comics' Instagram and their social media this last week. Needless to say, we are far from done with Hela, but we felt that this series was necessary to get our heads around where that's going. And like Eric said, we got a big fight and we got a bunch of little lore nuggets dropped here and there. And then, of course, as most Al Ewing issues of comics do, it ended on one of those like, okay, where, how, when, one of those things. But we are going to be spoiling the story for Knull issue number 3. So if you are wanting to check that out unspoiled, we would highly recommend you go check that out. Come back, maybe hear some of our thoughts after you have formed your own thoughts. But Eric, without further ado, we should jump into this because we've got some work to do. from what
That's
from what
right.
I've read and from what you've told me, we have a little bit of work to do to put together our thoughts for this issue. Broad strokes in this spoilery synopsis, this summary. This issue is written by Al Ewing and Tom Waltz. Juan and Ramirez puts in another great issue of work, doing what Eric said, adding the gore, the grossness, the messiness to these issues. Eric Archimegia does the colors. VC's Clayton Cowles does the letters, and it was another fantastic Ryan Stegman cover. So this book is being put together by a lot of an all-star cast, and we're really enjoying their work on this book. We start off where the last one left off, with Thanos. And Thanos is kind of recalling some of his more recent history with the Infinity Gems. We get a little bit of his philosophy with death. We know that death is a big theme of Thanos' comics in the past. So we come a little bit closer to current of what he thinks of death now. And then we get right into what Thanos thinks of Knull. And I'll just cut to the chase. He does not think much of him. He is not a big fan of the former King in Black, the former god of the symbiotes. This leads to a really brutal, really gross, especially bloody fight where the Outriders are kind of watching back Knull. kind of teases what's going to happen with the Outriders later on in the issue. And Thanos basically bullies Knull for a large portion of this fight. The all light spear is involved, but then Knull disappears. And like Eric mentioned at the beginning of this episode, he disappears into null space, the in-between space, and then he reemerges inside of Thanos' chest cavity and bursts out. There's entrails, there's all I don't even know what organs Mad Titan has, but if you wanted to know what they might be, you could look at some of these panels and you'd start to understand Null has defeated Thanos in the first half of this issue. He kills him. Thanos drops to the floor with his eyes all glazed back in his head, and he takes control of the Outriders. The Outriders now follow him, and he imbues them with the power of all light, and we get a little bit of a glow up for Null. We've been talking so much, Eric, about the glow up that Hela is getting, but Null is also getting one hell of a glow up. Here, he this golden, bright, shining armor, the armor that the God of Light had all the way back in Jason Aaron's run of Thor when we saw them for the first time. Very armor reminiscent of that. We then jump to Hela and Tyr as they continue their conquest throughout the stars, get a little bit more of the backstory being fleshed out of what Hela's true mission is and how Tyr factors into that. But we also see her rough up some aliens, rough up some spaceships, and we see her destruction kind of grow and grow and grow. The issue ends with Null reminiscing a little bit, going back to the good old days when Eddie Brock was the one person that would really come against him. And guess what? Still holds a grudge against Eddie Brock. Above anything else, Eric, he hates Eddie Brock and can't stand him. We get some references to the King in Black series, which again, told you guys I'm a massive fan of. And then we end the issue with Null flying into a sun, into a star, and then it looks that he is on fire. He's kind of burning up in the atmosphere of the sun, but then he reemerges in a completely different world. This is he emerges in Earth. I believe it's 26466. Oh no, 62466. Sorry. Apologies. But then he is face to face with Eddie Brock, the Illuminated. Now, Eric, I have a bunch of questions about Eddie Brock, the Illuminated. But first impressions, thoughts, and maybe something that listeners, viewers we need to tease and kind of pull out of this issue as we go throughout our thoughts.
Well, listeners, remember that in the beginning of the issue, they're on the planet that is Gorr's homeworld. And that is, one of the massive Thor connections here. And
Right.
All Light, the spear, is the spear from that panel when it's Null's first appearance, where he's this like Black Knight character, and then there's this golden god, and they killed each other as they fell to the planet. And that's where Gorr found All Black originally. That is all like the context of this fight. And so when Null gets the golden armor, he is now basically this avatar of light, of this golden power of light, and gets the armor that comes with it. So that's incredibly cool because I love the Thor pieces of it, aside from just the fact that I love like I said, the violence, the fight. At one point I think, oh my gosh, there's this panel where it looks like Thanos is ripping Null's face off. I think he's just punching him in the face, but like
Yeah,
he
it gets
mentions
gross.
like, you have a face I can strike, and it kind of looks like, oh, did he just like rip the skin off his face because everything's all bloody? I love there's some really, in addition to the gore, there's some really poetic moments. I love this idea of from endless darkness, accursed burning light, from burning light, cold, merciless revenge. So it's just accursed burning light. That's such a
Yeah.
great embodiment for sort of where he's at right now. He's like, normally he would hate the light. that he's like, this
Right.
is my path to get revenge. So let's
Yeah.
go. Let's light powers activate. Like, let's check it out.
I do yeah, I love that, like, that twisted mirroring of it's the one thing he should hate, but it's the one thing he knows he needs to get revenge on who he actually despises, the person that's actually taken his power. I do love that Knull kind of lives in a constant duality with a lot of different things. It's a really cool way that Al's written his character.
Yeah. And the fact that Thanos is kind of Hela's lapdog in this, and he's sort of just going there to do the fight on her behalf, really kind of paints her even in a more powerful big bad kind of light. Because
Yeah.
if Thanos is kind of the errand boy here, like Hela must be even more powerful, and at least in that she's the looming threat role. And because normally Thanos is the tease that you get several issues in a row, and he's the
Yeah.
big bad waiting at the end. Now she is, and Thanos is actually pretty quickly disposed of.
It'd be fair to say that Thanos is the end game in most scenarios, Eric.
Usually, yeah.
I love that not only did we follow through on the fight that was promised to us at the end of last issue, because if you did check out our review of issue 2, Eric and I got to the end of that issue just like, well, this is gonna be awesome. Like this is like how can that not be great? You have two A tier guys that are clashing for this spear, this powerful weapon, and there's another also A tier villain off somewhere else. It's like we got together a vile all-star team, and now there's just infighting within all these different characters. I love the setup, and then how Al and Tom wrote the I would say the temporary conclusion to that fight. uh, Eric, what are some of the parts of this issue that maybe deserve further explanation for someone that's walking into this
Well,
series? Yeah,
there's a big obvious one at the end, but before we get to that,
right,
I do want to spend a little bit of time on the two-page spread where Hela and Tyr, don't forget Tyr's there as well. She's growing her power, and so she's off in space right now, just sort of taking over these other areas and using Knull's basically his like void powers like a battery. So she's combining the symbiote power of All Black with her own control of necrotic magic or the god of death powers, however you want to think about it, to sort of make this the way I interpret this is it's almost like a hybrid of symbiotes plus like death magic equals
okay,
this power up that is more than just, it's not just the all black version of Hela, like we've seen, the all black version of other characters before. She's adding her own special sauce to it, if you will, to
for
expand her
sure.
abilities. But let's jump to the part where, again, I am not the world's authority on Venom lore or Spider Verse stuff, but I can imagine if you're coming here as a typical Thor fan, this might be a little bit of a blind spot. So as Knull is flying into the sun, which remember is kind of how Eddie Brock disposed of him at the end of King in Black. Eddie
Right,
had the Enigma Force and was basically resurrected with the Enigma Force and the light that comes with that, and strips the title of King in Black from Knull. And then once Knull loses the title, then Eddie disposes of him. I think he basically flies him into the sun. And so I think
right,
flying into the sun is this part of his history, his path, his destiny. There might be this element where it's like he has to push through that element of his story to get beyond to something else, because that is how Eddie, the Illuminated, gets into this area called the Lumina in the first place. This is sort of an area beyond. It actually
um,
exists outside of time and space, and it is a counterpart to the Garden of Time. If you remember the Venom series a couple years ago, we had Meridius, we had this weird realm that was like all these other creatures there, Bedlam, but they were all kind of just versions of Eddie Brock. And so there's a
mm,
lot of different Eddies out there, and Meridius was one of them. And so the Illuminated is one of them too, but he's the one that I can never say this word abdicated, abdicated
abdicated.
the throne.
Yeah, abdicated.
Thank you. He gave up the title. I'll say that he gave up the
Yes,
title of King in Black. So of all the Eddies, if he gave up the title of King in Black, then he becomes this transcended version of the final of so there's this being called the eventuality, which is all roads of Eddie lead to that. And it's
Okay.
this like dark symbiote hand. And that's like the highest level of consciousness finality version of all the Eddies. And the Illuminated is like the one version of Eddie that doesn't take that route. He's the
Okay.
one who abdicated, gave up the title of King in Black, and goes through the timeline, correcting mistakes and preserving this timeline of Eddies in the
Okay.
past. So he's almost like a paladin of the timeline of Eddies, and he's going to fix things. And he
Okay.
is sort of stuck in this light force dimension, is actually what it's called. The Lumina is the light force dimension. Doesn't seem to be any way related to the dark force dimension.
Oh,
So
come
it's not like the
on.
opposite of that. It's just called the light force
It
dimension.
would have would have
Um,
been so
I
easy.
know. But this doesn't need to be any more complicated than it is. We don't need to bring the dark force dimension into this. But so we're in the light force dimension. He looks badass. He's like
Oh,
this white knight on a horse.
yeah.
He's basically, I think, like paladin is a great way to describe it because he is essentially elevated. He's like essentially holy. He's deific. It gets a little bit twisty because when you think about the symbiotes, you might think of things like codexes and
Right.
hive minds and things like that. If you extrapolate that out to its eventuality, you start to think about symbiotes in terms of just the abstract concept of knowledge itself or information itself. And so he's
Right.
really kind of like the embodiment of that. And that's where I get in over my eyeballs in Venom lore and I say,
Well,
"You know what? He's like a future good guy."
yeah. Yeah. You're already if we're in a building, you're already 10 stories above where probably most people are. So
Yeah.
that's helpful in and of itself. I do love this reimagining of Eddie as I'm reminded of a line from Lord of the Rings where when Gandalf the White comes back, he and people think, well, you must be Saruman, the evil white wizard. He's like, I am Saruman, but more I am him as he should have been. So when Knull encounters this Eddie, it's like, you're Eddie. It's like, I'm what Eddie should have been. Going back and rewriting those wrongs. Very interested to see how Knull, now in the all light armor with the spear and the power of all these outriders with him. I'm interested to see how that clashes in the next issue.
You
Yeah.
know what? That's not too far off. I mean,
Okay.
if Null is this is Null coming back to become like Saruman, and these two, white wizard versions of these characters are gonna face off in the Light Force dimension, and they're gonna have a wizard battle in their
So
higher elevated, enlightened versions of themselves, right? So it's very appropriate, I think.
consider issue
Um,
4 already bought just on that speculation alone.
I wanted to say I was gonna credit Al Ewing with all this nonsense because that's what I would assume
Right.
the person making all this stuff up. But actually, the first appearance of Eddie Brock, the Illuminated, and of this light force dimension called the Lumina was in a Infinity comic by Steve
What?
Orlando called Venom Original Sin Infinity comic. And
Well,
there's a whole issue that just explains all this to you. And it's just like, wait, what? Why is
that
this just what it seems like a big deal? Why is this dropping in an Infinity comic?
well, so what I love about that is it shows kind of the ignorance of me as a comic book fan. Like deep, complicated, convoluted lore is not something I associate with Steve Orlando. But I kind of love that it's like, well, you know what? Shows you what I know. Like that's fantastic. And I'm assuming this was before Steve Orlando became pretty much the Scarlet Witch Wanda Maximoff writer. I love that Al is just like, hey, that thing that Steve had over there, I'm gonna use that to a big, huge, null level kind of intricacy and involvement. I love that.
I mean, they must have been talking. I'm sure
For sure.
Venom's a big enough, IP to they probably had some kind of a retreat and they're like, what the hell are we doing with all this Venom stuff? And they probably get together and they're like, yeah, so like what's the more evolved version of that? What's it going to be like? When can we, dip our toe into this? So I
Yeah.
don't think somebody would just decide, "Oh no, you know what? Meridius was the ultimate version of Eddie, but we made one that's even more ultimate and then one that's
Yeah.
beyond that." So,
Yeah, in comics that's not uncommon where it's like this is the most powerful ancient power of all time. Aha, but until you go back even further. But it's
yeah,
like,
this
oh
one is
gosh. Like at one point in Marvel Comics history, Galactus was the big bad and he was the world-ending thing. And it was like, yeah, but now like the Fantastic Four kind of beat him every month or so.
yeah.
Within a given time. So I like that. I like that of like, yes, there is an all good, all pure version of Eddie that is going to go back through, and there's just no way he's going to get along with this Knull. They've got to scrap at some level in the next issue. But Eric, any other final thoughts about issue number 3, and we'll save kind of larger speculation for a separate video we're going to do about the Queen in Black event that is coming up in the summer.
Well, so far we've seen, Hela is getting a power up, Knull is getting a power up. Both of these opposing forces are basically just on their own separate quests to get as much
Yeah.
power as they can, and then presumably are going to clash in the big summer event. So it's exciting to sort of get a peek behind the curtain of how are they explaining that this isn't just regular old Knull again versus regular old Hela? They're going through these parallel transformations. And I think it's fascinating because you know what? I think, I'm a big fan of creators taking big swings, right?
Right.
And so this is big. Like Knull, with the gold armor, Hela with the all black. I mean, they're already transforming the characters, and I think they're gonna keep upping the stakes even further.
Right, right, and I've tried to stay away from spoilers or previews or variant covers because sometimes those things can kinda let a little bit of the surprise cats out of the bag. I've tried to stay away from those for 4 and 5, but then, once Queen in Black event stuff, crossover stuff starts to come out, I'm like, "Okay, how do we get there?" And I'm thinking that issue 4 has gotta kinda tell us a little bit about how a certain extra glow up happens to Knull, because I don't think we're done seeing Knull change. That that is not
Yeah.
something I think we're done with. Yeah, I hope everybody checking this out, listening to it, viewing this is excited for the rest of Knull. We have 2 more issues of that, and then we're gonna be jumping into the Queen in Black crossover event starting in July, I believe. That is gonna be written by Ewing, and they're gonna continue this fantastic meta story into that, and it'll give us time to do what Eric has done and do a little bit of homework, understand more of the intricacies of this story. But Eric, any other
Ryan got
final
kicked
thoughts
off his
before we just hop
own
over the rainbow
video.
bridge and call it quits on our review of Knull number 3? Okay, Eric. So we have digested Knull number 3. Are there any other final thoughts you have before we head aboard the Bifrost and get out of here?
I think I'm good. I think I'm thoroughly excited for where this mini series is going. It's taking a little bit more of a turn than I originally thought, but I'm on board for the ride. So let's go into the Light Force dimension. Why not?
I love it. Anybody who has made it to this point in the video or the episode, please feel free to reach out to us on Instagram and Discord. We have links for that in the description below. Or if you feel extra generous and you want to leave a subscription, a sub, as people on YouTube call it, because I sound 1,000 when I say that. But if you want to follow the show, subscribe, rate, review, that would be fantastic. We would really appreciate that. And yeah, that is all the ways that you can go get more of us. Make sure that other people get more of these reviews that we do for mostly Thor comics. But I guess we're kind of just referring to Knull, this limited series, and Queen of Black as Thor related books. So way more symbiotes in our future. We're gonna get a whole year of symbiotes that I didn't even see coming. It's going to be good. But with that, we just say whether you are tracking down ancient weapons to fight your cosmic villains, whether you have big events on the horizon, whether you have some lore you need to dig through to get the right answers, we just tell you to do one thing, and that is to stay worthy.